Okay, video 6.2 of Research Methods RS-503. We're continuing our look at Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book. And we're going to, this is part 2, and we're going to talk now about level 4 of reading. He calls it analytical reading. So we looked at 3 readings, the most recent of which, level 3, inspectional reading, which helps you kind of get started into reading. And now level 4 is the kind of the highest level of reading. Going to teach us how to really digest and understand what we read. Analytical reading is thorough reading, complete reading, or good reading, the best reading you can do. Analytical reading is the best and most complete reading that is possible given unlimited time. Of course, we don't have unlimited time in school, so much of this applies to your own personal reading. The reader must ask many and organized questions of what he is reading. It is intensely active reading. The reader works at it until the book becomes his own. So that's really where analytical reading is headed. It's hard work in a book, the goal of which is to make the book your own. And so how do you make a book your own? I might say at this point, to me, this is so applicable to the study of the Bible, because when you are studying a book of the Bible, there is a real sense in which you want to make this book your own. You want to know this book as well as possible. And by knowing this book as well as possible, you're getting to know our Lord better and better. So really, we want to make the Bible our own. And so here are some guidelines for doing that. But this is not just for Bible. This is for reading any kind of book. If you have the habit of asking a book questions as you read, you are a better reader than if you do not. So in the last 4 videos of this course, we're going to be talking more about the Bible study method side, the hermeneutic side. Part of that we call observation, and so you're asking questions in the observation part of Bible study. You're asking questions of the text, and so that's what he is advocating here. As you read, not only Bible, but commentaries, theological works, anything, ask questions. You'll be a better reader than if you do not. Full ownership of a book only comes when you have made it a part of yourself. And the best way to make yourself a part of it is by writing in it. And I have come to appreciate that fact more and more. The fact that as you read, you need to write in your book. And I don't mean just underline or highlight things, and that is definitely part of it, definitely important. But in the margins, you need to make comments, ask questions. You say, what does he mean by this? Or where is this? You can just ask all sorts of questions. Who, what, when, where, why, how? Sorts of questions. But you really make yourself part of a book if you write in it as you go. Marking in a book keeps you awake, makes you think, and helps you remember. Those are 3 great reasons to have a pen handy when you are reading. I will say reading a book worth reading. Reading a book should be a conversation between you and the author. Presumably, he knows more about the subject than you do. If not, you probably should not be bothering with his book. But understanding is a two-way operation. The learner has to question himself and question the teacher. So I like that, that thinking, that reading a book is a conversation between myself and the author. He's stating something. If I'm underlining or making a comment in the margin, asking a question, it's like I'm having a back and forth with the author. And so, as we saw in one of our earlier books, our research papers are really supposed to be an amiable conversation between the writer and the reader as they are discussing the evidence for the answer to the question that is being asked. Adler quotes Sir Francis Bacon, who said, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested." Chewing and digesting is analytical reading. Analytical reading is preeminently for the sake of understanding. So you're reading for understanding. That's what we're doing with analytical reading. The basic prescription for active or analytical reading is to ask questions while you read. Questions that you yourself must try to answer in the course of reading. As I mentioned, one of the steps, in fact, the first fundamental step of Bible study method is observation. You're looking at the text and seeing what does it say, and part of that process is asking questions as you read. Here's some questions you can ask. What is the book about as a whole? You must try to discover the leading theme of the book and how the author develops this theme. This is a fundamental goal for Bible study. Another question, what is being said in detail and how? You must try to discover the main ideas, assertions, and arguments that constitute the author's particular message. And so you're looking at words, you're looking at sentences, you're looking at paragraphs, and so you're observing everything you can think of about what is being written. Even the tiniest detail is maybe worth a question or two. Why is this here? Why did the author write this way? Why did the author use this tense of verb versus another tense of verb? Why did he choose this particular word versus another word? There's just all sorts of things you can ask of the text. Number 3, is the book true in whole or in part? You cannot answer this question until you've answered the first two. Well, if you're studying the Bible, the answer to this one is obvious. Yes, it is true. But you may be reading a theological work where this might be in question. And so you can't answer this question unless you have asked questions of the text as you read. Number 4, what of it? So what? If the book has given you information, you must ask about its significance. So in our Bible study method, the last step is what we call application. So how is this biblical text significant for me today? And that's what this is. That's what this fourth question is about. Is there something here that is significant for me? Adler lays out 7 rules of analytical reading. The first rule, you must know what kind of book you're reading. And you should know this as early in the process as possible, preferably before you begin to read. Well, how do you do this? Well, that's inspectional reading that we talked about, the third level of reading. Remember, pre-reading or skimming, and then superficial reading. And so when you read a book of the Bible, for example, you need to know, what kind of book is this? What type of literature am I reading here? Am I reading a letter? Am I reading a narrative? Is it history? Is it poetry? Is it prophecy? Is this section a parable? Is it apocalyptic, like the book of Revelation, portions of that book are? So there's, you got to know what kind of literature you're in. And part of that is inspectional reading. The second rule, state the unity of the whole book in a single sentence, or at most a few sentences, a short paragraph. This is what one of the big things you're after in the study of the Bible, is to state the theme of the book. And so when he says unity of the whole book, you're looking for the theme. And I don't like a few short sentences. I like it stated in a single sentence. A single sentence with a subject and a complement. And I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology, subject and complement. Subject is, what's the book talking about? The complement is, what does the book say about what it's talking about? So you can construct subject complement sentences, subject complement statements for every paragraph in the book. And then you start tying all that together and come up with a single statement that would cover the whole book. To find out what a book is about is to discover its theme or main point. The third rule is to set forth the major parts of the book and show how these are organized into a whole by being ordered to one another and to the unity of the whole. So again, we are looking for that single theme, but part of that search is to see how the different parts of the book contribute toward that theme. And so really, when you're reading analytically, you're working from the bottom up, okay? You're seeing how this paragraph, what is the idea of this paragraph? And then you go to the next paragraph. What is the idea of this paragraph? And so forth. And then you start thinking, well, how do these two paragraphs relate to one another? And when you've got those two, then how do these three then? Okay? So you're building up. And suddenly you got a whole section of paragraphs that seem to link together. And then maybe there's a second section, maybe there's a third section, and then all these sections are organized into a whole, and then you arrive at the unity of the book. A good book is an orderly arrangement of parts, and we would say the Bible is definitely a good book. Each major part has a certain amount of independence, but it also must be connected with other parts. That is, related to them functionally, for otherwise it would not contribute its share to the intelligibility of the whole. And so every piece of a book of the Bible fits together. Every piece of a well-written book, a well-written theological work, say, it all is connected together. The most readable book is an architectural achievement on the part of the author. The best books are those that have the most intelligent structure. Though they are usually more complex than poorer books, their greater complexity is also greater simplicity because their parts are better organized, more unified. A well-stated unity indicates the major parts that compose the whole. You cannot comprehend a whole without somehow seeing its parts. But it is also true that unless you grasp the organization of its parts, you cannot know the whole comprehensively. Again, all the parts fit together. So that's what you're trying to figure out, is how this part links to this part, and how this part relates to this part, and how it all contributes to the whole. A piece of writing should have unity, clarity, coherence. If the writing has unity, we must find it. If the writing has clarity and coherence, we must appreciate it by finding the distinction and the order of the parts. What is clear is so by the distinctiveness of its outlines. What is coherent hangs together in an orderly disposition of parts. I believe that the books of the Bible have unity, clarity, coherence. It's our job as interpreters to figure that out. The fourth rule of analytical reading, find out what the author's problems were. So this is part of detailed study. And this also would apply to theological works and commentaries. As you digest a theological work, you can come to terms with what the author's wrestling with. And when you are reading a letter of Paul, for instance, you can come to terms with what he is wrestling with. Why did he write this particular church at this particular time? What were the problems this church was having? The author of a book starts out with a question or a set of questions. The book ostensibly contains the answers or answers. Rule 5, find the most important words and through them come to terms with the author. You will learn in Bible study methods or hermeneutics the importance of word studies. And so you study how authors use terms or how they use words. What is their terminology? Why does an author use a particular term in a particular context? Does this author use this term in other places in this book? Does this author use this term in other places in other of his books? Does this term occur elsewhere in the New Testament or Old Testament? So as you chew and digest these books, you will come to recognize the important words. Also, the words that are repeated tend to have importance. And so it's incumbent on us as interpreters to what Adler calls to come to terms with the author. In other words, you're figuring out what he means by his terminology. Stated another way, you must spot the important words in a book and figure out how the author is using them. Coming to terms is the first step beyond the outline. Rule 6, mark the most important sentences in a book and discover the propositions they contain. So this would be applicable to the study of God's Word. As you are reading, observing, asking questions, mark what seems important. This is also true for anything you might read in your coursework. Is you can there will be sentences that jump out at you as being important for the author. And finally, Rule 7, locate or construct the basic arguments in the book by finding them in the connection of sentences. We want to know not merely what his propositions are, but also why he thinks we should be persuaded to accept them. So we're looking for the author's argument. We're looking for his flow of thought. We're looking for his theme. An argument is always a set or series of statements of which some provide the grounds or reasons for what is to be concluded. A paragraph, therefore, or at least a collection of sentences, is required to express an argument. Again, a paragraph in well-written literature contains a central idea. It contains an argument. And so it's a good idea to study things on a paragraph level. You discover terms by discovering what a word means in a given usage. You discover propositions similarly by interpreting all the words that make up the sentence, especially its principal words. So again, the importance of terminology in understanding an author. So in summary of analytical reading, 1, classify the book according to kind and subject matter. In regards to the Bible, look for what genre, what type of literature you're in. Number 2, state what the whole book is about with the utmost brevity. We're looking for a subject complement statement. Number 3, enumerate its major parts in their order and relation, and outline these parts as you have outlined the whole. So we're trying to determine how all the major parts fit together. Define the problem or problems the author has tried to solve. Books of the Bible were written at a particular time for a particular reason. Why did the author write this book at this time? Is there an issue he's addressing or something along those lines? Number 5, come to terms with the author by interpreting his key words. Again, we have to know terminology. Grasp the author's leading propositions by dealing with his most important sentences. And finally, know the author's arguments by finding them in or constructing them out of sequences of sentences. And we might say here, finding them in paragraphs. This is the end of 6.2.